Bung Pod. Welcome back, Wine Wonder Boy.
And we got Jazzy J. Jazzy!
What is a bung?
The hole of the barrel is called a bung hole. Inside the bung hole is called a bung. Wine with mayhem. That's what it's about. Welcome back to the Bung Pod, everybody. My name's Ian King, aka Wine Wonder Boy. I got my co-host with me, Jazzy J. Say what's up.
What's up?
What's up? A few things on the docket. Go get our merch, bungpod.store. Get some hoodies, get some tees. All the links in the description, and all the links to this interview, all of their marketing, wine club. Go do it. It's going to be in the show notes below as well. And without further ado, we have a great episode for you guys here. We have our friend from Gramercy Cellars. We have Brandon Moss here. He's the winemaker. What's up, Brandon?
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for taking your time out. It seems like you had a really busy day today.
Yeah, it was a busy day. I was, just getting back in the swing of things, been selling some wine on the road. Was just in Toronto, Montreal. We just got back from Coeur d'Alene in Seattle last week. And then I actually spent about half the day just checking vineyards because we've had a really interesting growing season here so far. We not only saw really cold temperatures in January, which I believe you guys are in the Lake Chelan area. I think you guys were even colder than we were here in Walla Walla.
Yeah.
That happened in January. And then in the last 4 to 5 days, we've been hovering right around 30 degrees for the last 4 or 5 days. So it's been really interesting. It's, Mother Nature's just throwing us all she has this year. So, but I just went out to all the estate vineyards. Everything's looking pretty healthy. Some stuff hasn't even budded out, which is kind of crazy right now because normally my birthday is right at the kind of April 12th. And normally almost every year I'll go out to the vineyards and you'll start seeing those first signs of life. You'll start seeing some buds opening up. And this year on April 12th, there was nothing. The vineyards still look dormant, and so we've been kind of patiently waiting for things to kind of progress. And finally, we're starting to see some action out in the vineyard. So it's I think we've actually helped ourselves because everything's delayed. We've been cold for the last 5 days, and most vineyards weren't actually budded out. So it actually kind of helped the situation compared to if in a normal year, if we would have been 15 days in and had shoots that were 3 inches, it might be a whole different story right now.
Oh yeah. Do you think they'd be more exposed to?
For sure. I mean, at any point, like any bud is exposed, you know what I mean? So whether it's 3 inches or 2 inches or whatever, but before they've actually, budded out, like when they're just getting fuzzy or when there's just starting to be sap flow, you're pretty well protected at that point. It's really when you start seeing those green leaves come out and, just that slight, couple hours at 30 degrees can just fry a vineyard. And, the bummer is if we fried the vineyard this year, we might not have extra buds to keep growing. Most years in a normal year where you don't have like a winter freeze, you would have secondary and tertiary buds that would come after that first one froze and you'd still get a crop. Like that actually happened in the Willamette Valley, I believe it was in 2022, where they froze and then everything kind of came back. But this year, because we had such a harsh winter freeze, I don't know if we'd have an extra bud available at this point in time. So I think that we might, if we froze, there might just be no growth other than coming from the bottom. So I think for the most part, I think we lucked out pretty big time on this one to get out pretty unscathed in most parts of the valley, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so what would you do if something like that happened where you didn't have growth in the vineyard? Like, how do you pivot from that?
I mean, that's a tough call. I mean, as a winery, you really got to make that decision as to, what's the best thing to do with my vineyard? Do I cut it back to the ground and let everything regrow from the ground? At this point in time, in Walla Walla, all my stuff is ungrafted and rootstocks just starting to come into the valley. So, depending on the situation and what I felt like about the vintage, I may just rip stuff out and replant it on the proper rootstock, because that's kind of the direction we're going. And we're starting to figure out the right rootstocks for Walla Walla, which, you know, rootstocks aren't really all bad because you can kind of get them suited towards your environment. And so, you know, in that situation, I might just rip everything out and replant on proper rootstock to ensure everything's going to be good for the next 50 years. You know what I mean? And I think those are, you know, sometimes these freeze events, they make you make hard decisions that can sometimes, I don't know, benefit you for, you know, for the long haul. So, but that being said, you know, we wouldn't want to go a vintage without producing any fruit. We do rely on our estate vineyards a lot, but we also, the estate vineyards for us are just about 35% of our overall production. So we have plenty of vineyards outside the valley that didn't get hit near as hard. And, you know, while Walla Walla and Lake Chelan did get really cold, places like the Horse Heaven Hills did not, you know, and so the Horse Heaven Hills, you know, a lot of that Yakima Valley area, they didn't get hit near as hard with the cold as places like Lake Chelan, BC, us. So I think that there's going to be plenty of good fruit out there, you know, if it is dire circumstances in Walla Walla.
Okay. Very nice.
And how many estate grapes do you have?
So we have one Syrah vineyard that has a couple rows of Viognier. That's about 9 acres. We have a primarily Bordeaux varietal vineyard on the valley floor that the entire property is 20 acres, but we have 6 acres under vine. And then we're also partners in an estate vineyard that is 30 acres total, but we're partnered with quite a few other wineries in that one. So we kind of came together as like a co-op with some wineries and planted that vineyard. And that's on the very, very south end of the Walla Walla Valley in Milton Freewater, but in this area called Savain. It's basically in these kind of windswept, dry ridgeline that's on the very south of the valley. It makes super concentrated Cabernet up there. So, you know, that's kind of what's unique about Walla Walla is we have a pretty diverse climate here and pretty diverse terroir just because of how our valley's set up, you know. So we try to have our estate vineyards kind of sputtered throughout the valley so that we can kind of take advantage of different growing conditions to grow certain grapes in specific areas of Walla Walla.
Right.
That's awesome.
Wow. So right now we are drinking there it is, 2019 Red Willow Syrah.
I like it. That's been fantastic right now. It's the Red Willow Syrah is a more of our, I'd say our more powerful, structured version of Syrah coming from the Yakima Valley. You know, Yakima Valley fruit's quite a bit different than what we're growing here in Walla Walla. I'd say Walla Walla Syrahs err on more of that like very savory and a little more plush on the palate. Whereas in the Yakima Valley, you get a little brighter acidity than you get in Walla Walla, and you get a more structured kind of like ageable long-term Syrah. We really love Lagniappe for that, and honestly, Red Willow is one of the best Syrah vineyards in the state of Washington. We love it.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. That it's one of the best Syrah vineyards in the state. And I wanted to pick your brain and ask you why. I mean, looks like there's like 13.5%. You guys have a pretty light touch in your winemaking, which, and for my palate, I prefer. It's my thing. I call it like the Somme kind of touch a little bit, because a lot of sommeliers, they just crave those more refreshing wines that aren't as big and bold and won't hinder your palate in any way, because they're tasting with reps all day with all these big Bordeaux, Napa wines, stuff that really, I'm not going to say kills your palate, because it doesn't kill it. It just, it tires it out. It fatigues your palate.
It becomes a lot.
It becomes a lot. Yeah. And this is beautiful. It has a bright acidity. The tannins are very structured as well, but still like a very light touch. And can you explain both the winemaking side of your style and also this particular vineyard?
Yeah, certainly. So first off, on the vineyard, Mike Sauer is the farmer out here at Red Willow, and it's a really unique site. So it's just about probably 10 miles to the south of Yakima. And it's really interesting because it is actually grandfathered in on a very, very large Indian reservation. So while this vineyard is known as being like one of the top Syrah vineyards in the state, you will not find another vineyard around it anywhere. There's orchards, there's lots of other stuff, but you will not see another vineyard around it. But Mike Sauer is very famous because he was the first person to plant Syrah in the state of Washington in 1987. And so he was working with a guy named David Lake from Columbia Winery. He's a master of wine. David Lake really knew about the world of wine and was buying Cabernet from Mike Sauer and said, Mike, like, I love your property. You have the elevation, you have the aspect to plant Syrah. Like, will you plant Syrah? And at that time, no one even thought Syrah would work in Washington. And Mike Sauer took a chance on the grape, and kind of the rest was history. And so, at this point, he's devoted quite a bit of his vineyard to Syrah. And we actually get a block that is right next to the oldest planting at the vineyard that was planted just a few years after the first planting happened out there. So we get some really old vines out there. It's a very sandy soil. So anytime you're growing fruit in sandier soils, you're going to get a more perfumed wine. So it's generally speaking, like if you put in the Yakima Valley, if you had more silty or clay type of soil, you get an even more powerful wine than what we have here. But because of those kind of sandy soils, you're going to get this very perfumed, elegant, refreshing wine that's going to be kind of like very aromatic. And then that also kind of translates to our winemaking style too. So in the winery, we like to make food-friendly wines. Our founder and initial winemaker, I kind of took over the winemaking, but our initial winemaker, Greg Harrington, he's a master sommelier. He got all his experience in the restaurant industry, really focused on food. And so when we came to make Gramercy wines, we really wanted to make food-friendly wines. We wanted to make wines that show best when you put them with a meal. And so our intentions on when we pick is always have restraint and always have acidity. Acidity is really the key, I think, to making a food-friendly wine because, you don't want wines without acidity can just get taken over by whatever food they're with, especially if you put them with a high acid food. It's just going to take over the wine. It's going to make the wine taste even more flabby than it is. And so you really need to kind of balance those acidities. And that's always what we think about whenever we're picking. In addition to that, in the winery, we're all native ferment. We are pretty minimal intervention. We'll add some nutrients for the yeast. Other than that, we are not really adding anything. So, for the most part, I always like to say, we're certainly not a natural winery and we're not trying to be that. We're definitely like minimal intervention. So, we're really trying to be as non-invasive as you could possibly be. We use just a tiny bit of sulfur, but other than that, I always say, like, as a winery, like, if you went by like European Union standards on being an organic winery, we would be that, and so that's how we like to treat everything in the winery.
Good.
Do you guys use a pied de cuve for your native ferments as well?
Yeah, that's how I get everything started. And then usually from there, what I like to do is I like to taste the fermentations as we go. And I always say whatever yeasts are kind of in their growth phase. So like I want to catch yeast when they're growing and expanding, because there's a point in fermentation, like, and especially in the first 5 bricks of a fermentation where yeast are just rapidly expanding, they're growing, they're splitting, they're just expanding. And I always figure if I can capture those yeasts as they're expanding, I'm going to be capturing yeast in their most healthy phase. So then we just taste every fermenter every day, and whatever comes in that next day, we'll pitch that into the next thing. We'll usually reset that once Cabernet comes in and make a new Pied de Cuvée for Cabernet, usually from a Cabernet specific vineyard. But for the most part, our start of our season gets started with Forgotten Hills Syrah, which is our own estate vineyard. We farm it all organically, so I figured it'll be a good substrate for, getting everything going in the season because we're not really using these like harsh sprays. And so for the most part, I've really thought the Pied du Cuvée does a very good job. And honestly, I just don't like sitting there like trusting a ferment to take off. I really like to make sure that it's going to take off, especially when we're using pretty minimal sulfur in the winery. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to trust a vat of grapes sitting there for 5 days hoping that it's going to take off. I'd rather initiate that and make sure we're making CO2, make sure we're getting the biologics under control, because we're already kind of taking a risk by going native that I figure we need to help those natives out and make them more successful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I learned that process through, I had some acquaintances down in California and Santa Barbara from Whitcraft down there. And they have a great history. They're awesome makers of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, cool climate, Syrah next to the ocean. And this kind of reminds me of some of their wines as well. And they always used Pied de Cuve as well. And, I haven't really seen it in other places. I've asked a lot of people that do native fermentations exclusively in their winery. And I think you're the only one so far that uses it. And I just always wonder why people don't, because I don't know, it looks like it's a very trusted process,
It is. And one of the things I'm going to start doing this year is I'm going to start testing my Pied du Cuvée just to make sure that, because I taste it every time, but like I want to make sure I'm starting with this very clean, very neutral profile in terms of what yeast I'm getting. So I'm going to start testing my Pied du Cuvée just to make sure that the yeast that I want in there are the ones there. But it's a tried and true method. Honestly, it works well. You just ensure, like I said, when you're doing natives, you're already kind of taking some risks that I feel like when you can reel those risks in a little bit and take a calculated risk rather than just a random risk, like you're doing a much better job at what you're trying to do. Because, like bottom line, like we want to make clean wines, you know what I mean? We want to make wines that are fruit forward, delicious. I mean, honestly, the delicious factor is the most important thing. You know what I mean? It's like, is it wine delicious? Like, if it's not delicious, then you've already failed as a winemaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Gotta make sure it's drinkable. You don't want to fuck up your wine.
And so, I mean, it's just like we love the effects of a native fermentation. It slows down the fermentation. It doesn't get as hot. I think that's kind of part of why our wines have this soft, elegant feel to them, because our fermentations just don't get that heat that's going to extract all those aggressive tannins out of the wine. And so we actually haven't had a native ferment go above about 78 degrees ever. And normally when I used to do inoculated yeast, you'd regularly see 90, 95 degrees in a ferment at the peak. And so we're adding a solid like 10 to 12 days onto our fermentation, and it's much more gentle on the wine, which I think is a style that is not going away. I mean, honestly, I think it's a style that people are gravitating towards now, especially like, as we get a whole new generation of wine drinkers in. Like, I feel like we are all kind of gravitating towards this maybe different style that is more sort of crushable. It's that the chillable reds, the kind of like interesting soft approach the native ferments, and it's a thing that I think is not going away. I think it's just going to be more and more popular as time goes.
It's interesting that you bring up chillable reds, because it seems like every time I have someone in the tasting room, they like, I'll always like recommend like, you can always chill this light bodied red, and they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, nobody said you couldn't. Like,
I don't understand the chillable red thing, but like I said, like, there's a whole new generation of wine drinkers that are starting to drink wine now, and they certainly do understand the chillable red, and it's a thing. I'd say, like, especially in Chelan, like there's some potential for those type of wines up there. You know what I mean? Like, plant a varietal that takes the whole season to get ripe, but is going to be more light bodied. Like, plant Grenache in Lake Chelan. Although I don't know if it could survive your winters, but like, probably
no.
Plant something that's going to be a lighter bodied red and let it, not get totally mature, and let it be this kind of light bodied red. And I think it's a thing these days,
I've been pushing for Gamay up here.
You think Gamay would survive the winters?
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I think honestly, like there's already Pinot Noir, so if you can do Pinot Noir, you can do Gamay. Because we've been sourcing fruit up in Chelan for quite a while actually. We make a Viognier from up there.
Oh,
What vineyard?
Well, it's actually just outside the AVA, but it's Antoine Creek.
Oh, yeah.
totally.
Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We've been making Viognier from Antoine Creek since 2012.
Oh wow.
Wow, yeah, that's a while.
It's quite a trek, but we really like the fruit. So it's a trek that's well worth it, and it's a very interesting site. It's like super granite hillside and lots of wind flow through the vineyard because you're on the Columbia River, and it's pretty crazy site.
Yeah.
Shout out to Antoine Creek.
Yeah.
Time. That's awesome.
So how many cases do you guys produce, or how many cases do you make?
We make right around 10,000 ish, depending on the vintage. We've been as high as like 14,000, but those are in heavy vintages. But 10,000 is kind of the sweet spot for us. It's just me and one other guy in the cellar, and so we're kind of like, if we were much over 10,000, I think we'd be swimming. So 10,000's perfect. We have a pretty small little facility here too. So it's just about the right amount of wine. And, the way we've always thought about it as a winery is, like I said, I just got done doing some trips, and I like doing trips, but like, I don't want trips to be every single week of my job, and once you start getting to a certain size, that's when, your job basically becomes getting on planes every day rather than going and checking on vineyards. And that's where we did not want to see the winery going,
So you said you guys were in how many different countries?
I think it's like 10 to 12 right now.
And what countries are those?
Oh, let's see. We are
know them.
South Korea. We are in Singapore. We are in Japan, Canada. We are in Germany and Sweden, and let's see. I'm going to forget some of these European ones because there's quite a few. Oh man. We've been in Switzerland. I'm not sure if we're there currently. Oh man, I know I'm forgetting one or two, but there's definitely a couple more out there that we're in that have been pretty positive for us. But like I said, other than like we sell a lot of wine in BC and Alberta and quite a bit of wine in UK. Other than that, international markets are not a huge part of what we're doing. We definitely rely on domestic a lot more, but at the same time, like I think it's good to have a worldwide presence. Just get your wines out there, and it's kind of gets your name out there. It gets the Washington State name out there too. We work a lot with Washington Wine Commission and do a lot of their events, and kind of try to promote the state as a whole. Because I feel like in addition to promoting our own winery, I think that getting Washington wine on a worldwide stage is kind of an important thing to do,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's take a break for a minute because Jazzy has got something to tell you.
All right, let's talk about it. So, did you know we do have extra episodes on Patreon?
What?
And you can only get these for $5.
What?
Yeah,
Crazy.
I know.
Go.
So, go to Patreon
Link is in the description of the episode.
and subscribe. $5, you're supporting us and you're getting to learn more about the wine industry.
Let's go.
Woo! All right. Guess what? I think Ian has something to tell us.
I do. We got some merch going on right now. We got hoodies.
Say what?
We got handbags.
No way.
We got stickers.
What?
We got tank tops right now for the summertime.
Ooh.
Hell yeah. We got some windbreakers too. So
Oh,
go to
shit.
bungpod.store and get your Bung Pod merch.
Yeah.
Baby.
All right, welcome back. So we talked about your case production and your style of winemaking, which is awesome. I love personally. So how did you get to be making this style of wine? Like, what's your background like?
How'd you get into wine, really?
So, honestly, In terms of making the style of wine, I think if I wouldn't have found Gramercy early on, I don't know what style of wine I would be making, but I'm not sure if it would be this style. So that's kind of one of the exciting things about finding Gramercy early in my career. But funny enough, I grew up in the Walla Walla Valley, and I actually worked in vineyards when I was 16 years old, and I never thought that would be the career that I would take, but I grew up kind of like on a farm. It wasn't like our primary thing, but like on Saturdays we'd go sell plums at the farmers market, and on the weekends we would, prune plum trees and, basically work on the farm all weekend long. And so that's kind of what we did. And so I've always kind of lived this agricultural life. I went to Oregon State, which I always feel very, very lucky for, because it's kind of in the heart of the Willamette Valley there. I pre-med is what I went there for originally. Started in about my fourth year of school, really started initially falling in love with making beer. I had a buddy that was a super beer nerd. He's actually in Pendleton, Oregon now, making beer and making food and mustards and all these things in Pendleton. But I started brewing them and really started getting into that. Then you start trying, lots of beers and kind of interesting things and things that are out there. And then just very randomly, I had this wine shop that I would walk by every day. And what's funny is I initially went in there for like a pack of Miller High Life, I think. It was like 5 Miller High Life. And I was like, oh, that's a deal of the century.
Let's
and
go.
This $5.99 Miller High Life pack on sale. So I'd always go in there. And I eventually like started going in. I'd chat with the guy and he'd be like, oh, you should try this wine, or you should like try this Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. It's really good. And so, I started trying that, and I really started like loving Pinot Noir and Willamette Valley Pinot Noir especially. And this was like, this would have been like 04, 05. This was like when you could actually afford Pinot Noir on like a college kid's book. It was like 20, 30 bucks would get you something that was like pretty good, and so I just started, walk by the shop. I'd pick up a bottle of wine and take it home and try it, and like really started like going down that rabbit hole. And, I think, as we all know, like wine is one of those things that it's just endless knowledge is out there, and you can never know it all. And you just keep striving to know more, And so it was one of those things that like, I've always liked learning about things. Like, it's just been a thing. I like learning and like figuring out stuff. And so wine was just one of those things that I feel like you can never figure out completely. It's like there's no one in this world that knows every single thing about wine, because it's just not possible to do so. There's master sommeliers who know so much about, all the producers of the world, but like if you gave them a complex organic chemistry equation that's something that's happening in wine, I bet most of them can't solve it, And then there's the other side that know all that, and probably can't tell you a producer in the world, And so, so I basically got in the wine program, learned food science, winemaking. When I worked at King Estate in the Willamette Valley, they're one of the largest organic producers. They were the largest organic producer in Oregon, and maybe one of the larger organic producers like on the whole West Coast. They're very large in terms of organics. And so I really wanted to learn that. So I went there, and then I took a jaunt to New Zealand. And worked down there. Really wanted to kind of see a bigger winery, see what Sauvignon Blanc was made. It was a really interesting venture. I feel like down there I went to a winery that was way too big, but at the same time it was pretty cool. I met a lot of really neat people. Basically, we had interns represented from every winemaking region in the world. And so it was like this melting pot of cultures down there. And then honestly, I came back to Walla Walla, which was supposed to be just a quick week-long vacation, meeting up with some friends and family. And then I was going to go back to the Willamette Valley. And I basically tried the wines that were being made here and was like, oh my God, I can't believe this is like being made where I grew up, because that wasn't really happening when I left, and I hadn't really tasted those wines all that much because Walla Walla wines didn't really have the reach to get to the Willamette where I was living or get to New Zealand. So I hadn't really tried many of these wines, and I just fell in love with what was being made here, and quickly hooked up with some of the people that were making wine at the same place where Gramercy was making wine. I became the cellar master for that facility, and then started kind of taking over a lot of responsibilities for Gramercy, and quickly realized that Greg the owner, and I really worked well together, and we were kind of like that yin and yang. He was a master sommelier who was very ethereal about wine. I was kind of this chemistry wine student who knew a lot about making wine, who knew a lot about science, but didn't necessarily know nothing about, kind of the worldwide scope of wine. And so it was kind of this like cool balancing act. He would show me cool things or show me cool books that he'd read in his master sommelier studies. And then I would read them and I'd be like, oh, I didn't know about using whole cluster fermentation, or like, why would you do fermentation? That's crazy. But then like you try these things and you're like, oh, okay, now I kind of get it,
So where did you, what was the winery in New Zealand?
So it was a very, very large winery. So it was called Indivin, massive. And they're even now, so they were massive when I was there back in like 2007. But from the people I've talked to that have gone there more recently, it has like 10 times the size of what it was when I was there. And like to put in perspective, what I always like to say about Indivin, so I worked my way up from, I was pretty young. Like they didn't want to let me run the presses, but I like to kind of challenge myself. And I really wanted to run the presses. I was like, this is what I came here to do. And so eventually I got bumped up and I got to run the presses, and I was running 3 presses in the night. We would do 3 press loads on all 3 presses. And on one single cycle through these 3 presses, I was running 400 tons.
Holy moly.
250-ton presses and 100-ton press. And I run every night. It was absolutely bonkers. Like I ran the night shift, and I would get to work, and there would literally be double dump trucks lined up for like miles, just waiting to unload grapes. It was a bonkers. I mean, it showed you a very different side of the wine industry that I don't think we normally experience that in Oregon and Washington. It's not something we see. And while it was really cool to see once, I don't think I'd want to do it again, other than meeting all the people. I mean, that's what was really cool about the whole situation is we had 60 interns. So, I mean, you can only imagine how big 60 interns, and they put us all up in a hostel. And so every night was like us getting together, sharing wines, making food, and just like learning about each other's cultures. So like, while maybe the winery was a little bit too big to really like, encapsulate like the learning environment that I wanted, like just learning from the people and meeting all the people, and now having all these contacts in, Portugal or Spain or Italy or wherever. It's like, if I needed to go to Portugal, I know I have someone's couch I could sleep on tomorrow. You know what I mean? And that's a pretty cool feeling,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely. So I have a question. From going from studying wine and then going under Greg, and at that point, you didn't really have a lot of experience with the world of wine, but you knew the chemistry behind everything in winemaking. How did he, and him being a master somm, how did he expose you to the world of wine? Besides books, like what's your experience actual tasting wines, and what kind of wines did you try that opened your mind?
Yeah, so one of the first things he did when I started working for him full time is he was like, you need to go buy this book right now. And it was called The Wines of the Northern Rhone. And I basically read that book front to back. And it was The Wines of the Northern Rhone is a really cool book because basically it'll have a producer, and then it says all the wines that they make, and they kind of tell you about their thought process behind making all of those wines. It tells you where it's from, what level they harvested it at, if they did whole cluster, if they were native, blah, blah, blah. But it gives you all the information on what they do. And then what I did is I just read it. And as we would try wines, I would kind of like cross check those with the things I'd read in that book and been like, oh, I really like this wine. Like, oh, why do I like it? And I'd go look it up in the book and I'd be like, oh, so they're doing this, this, and this. And like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, who's doing that in Washington? It's like, oh, no one's doing that in Washington. Oh, well, maybe we should try doing that, you know? And so that's kind of how it goes. And, you know, everything in winemaking is just like trial and error. You know, it's like you try something, you see if it works, and then you're like, okay, well, that worked. Or like, hey, maybe that didn't work. Like, let's, you know, you're never going to make a bad wine. Well, sorry, preface that. You can make a bad wine with trial and error. Be taking a trial that's going to result in like making a terrible wine. It's like, am I going to make something good or better? You know what I mean? Not bad or good, you know? And so we would do trials that like wouldn't necessarily like make bad wines, but like, hey, let's try 100% whole cluster in something and see what it does, you know? But let's only do it in a half a ton rather than in 4 tons, you know? And so we would do these little trials when the winery started. And, you know, that's kind of like what it came from. But, you know, like really, Greg exposed me to a lot of Northern Rhone wines that I just wouldn't have known existed, you know? And probably my favorite one, probably the most geeky one, but Jamais, Jamais Côte Rôtie. That's
Let's go.
that wine right there is like, you know, it's not about fruit. It's about like olives and brine and meat. And it's like everything I love in Syrah. And honestly, I would have ever found that wine because it's not a wine that like if you're a connoisseur, like it's not a wine that necessarily is something that everyone knows. Like a lot of people in the Northern Rhone, they'll know Allemand, they'll know Chave, they'll know kind of those or Rostang, or Guigal, you know, like those are the big ones. Those are the collector's wines. But like Jamais is one that's like, that's a geeky wine, you know, and that's a cool. The other one that Greg exposed me to that like I would have never have known is Gonan, Saint Joseph. That's one that is not super common. It's gotten really expensive to date, but like I still think that like not that many people know about that wine, and it's one of the most delicious Northern Rhone Syrahs that I've ever had. And then, you know, like when it comes to like Bordeaux wines, I mean, we don't drink all that much U.S. Bordeaux wines because we really ache ourselves to like want to make a Bordeaux style, you know? And so I really like, you know, just the classics in Bordeaux, you know, like Puy Lacoste. You know, so just the classics, I feel like really embody what we want to make. And so, you know, while we started as a Syrah winery, I feel like, you know, we're kind of an equal Bordeaux and Syrah winery these days. So I like to, you know, kind of go on both sides and try both, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, some of those producers you named, I probably went right over Jasmine's head, but at some point,
I know, in the vineyard side.
I really hope to expose her to a lot of those producers like Jamais, Allemand. They're some of my favorites. I have yet to have a Chave. One of my bucket list wines is a Chave Hermitage, and so it's a very fucking expensive wine. And so I have yet to get my hands on it.
Those wines have gotten so expensive. Like even Jamais, I remember when I first got exposed to it with Greg, and I looked to go buy some. I think it was only $55, maybe $60. I know. I definitely bought some. I remember. And then like every year I'd go look again, and like when they release, and it was like, oh well, it was 55. Oh, now it's 70. Oh, now it's 90. And I'm not talking like $5 price increases. I'm talking $20 a year. And then now I think the last time I saw it, it was like, well, actually the estate split. So it's kind of different now. The brothers split the estate. So now there's 2 different Jamais. So I don't know if you can necessarily compare straight up what they're making now with maybe what was happening. I think it happened maybe 5 to 6 years ago. But like the last time I saw it, it was like, I mean, those bottles were like $190, I think, you know, 100, 200. And so they've gone crazy. Same thing happened with Gonan, you know, Gonan you used to be able to get for like $45. It was a smoking deal because Gonan is actually Saint Joseph, which is not quite as famous appellation as like Côte Rôtie or Hermitage. Mm-hmm. And so smoking deals, but it's the same thing for Ganon. Those wines are now like $175. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nuts right now. That's like, 45, $50. That's what like Cru Beaujolais is going for nowadays.
Yeah, it's wild. And Cru Beaujolais used to be like 25,
Exactly. People like fucking me that keeps pushing Gamay and Beaujolais, driving the fucking prices up, man.
Cru Beaujolais is just inherently delicious. And there's a lot of cool, like naturally producers in Beaujolais that I think make some like I'd argue that like Beaujolais, especially like with the natural producers, are making some of the cleanest, most friendly, natural style wines that you're gonna find out there in this world. They're just delicious.
Yeah, one of my favorites right now is on Sophie Dubois out in Fleury. She's got to be one of my favorite producers right now, Beaujolais.
So what are you drinking over there? I did see you had a glass.
I had a little bit of our Forgotten Hills Syrah. We had one that was about 2 days in, and where I really like our wines. And actually, if you guys get the chance, save like just a little bit of that bottle, because our wines are really best on like day 3.
Okay.
Forgotten Hills wine that I have right now is on day 3, and it's just singing. We keep everything pretty tight in the cellar, so we keep everything on its lees. We basically don't rack Syrah all that much. We want to keep it really tight when it goes in bottle. So our wines have like a lot of longevity in terms of aging, in terms of once you open it, like they're going to be maybe a little tight in those first like couple hours. So like anyone that opens our wines, I'm always like, yeah, if you can, pop that cork 24 hours before, or throw it in a decanter or whatever you can do, because we intentionally make this style that's going to be a little quiet without air. You know what I mean? But what we've seen is that style gets the longevity in the bottle. So like we are going, like we just did a seminar a couple weeks ago, and we showed our 2010 Reserve Syrah. And honestly, it was tasting delicious, but like I'd say at least 5 more years, if not, longer, you know what I mean? And we're already talking about 14 years in, and I'm thinking at least 5 to maybe even 10 years longer before it really starts to fade. And so I think our wines have longevity, but it's kind of fun. We'll do this a lot at home, is, have a couple glasses on a bottle and then just be like, let's open something different and throw that back in the wine fridge and then come back a day or 2 later. And it's honestly almost always better. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I was during this podcast, I'm like, God damn, I really need to make it to Walla Walla now.
Actually, I
had a jaunt though from Chelan. It's like solid 5 hours. It's pretty good.
That's the only reason why we're not hanging out with you in person right now.
I know,
because we do podcasts on the road. So I do take my setup with me and go places. I happened to be in Santa Barbara like in March, and so I did a podcast in person with a winemaker down there, which was awesome. But yeah, one thing that we really want to do is take this podcast on the road, go to Walla Walla, do a bunch of episodes, and hopefully we can reconnect and we can do one in person as well.
We could taste in the cellar. We could do some fun stuff. Like, Walla Walla is a fun town too. It's like, it's an easy town to really make like a really fun weekend getaway. Great restaurants, so many wineries, kind of cool downtown bar scene. Like, it's honestly, there's a reason why there's so many wineries here, kind of like Chelan, you know what I mean? There's a reason why there's a lot of wineries in Chelan. It's because it's a fun town, you know what I mean? There's fun stuff to do downtown. It has a cool little classic downtown vibe, and we kind of have the same thing here, where we have a lot of restaurants that I always say, like, the restaurants that can survive in Walla Walla are ones that could probably survive in a city as well, like a big city, and that's what kind of makes it unique and special, is that, you can come down here, you make it a weekend and have like a really nice time with wineries and bars and restaurants, and, and it's, and the people are really great too. We're a real wine community over here. So.
Yeah, I love the Walla Walla area. I went there in June of last year for me and my girlfriend's birthday. We have the same birthday. Not the same year, but the same date, June 20th, which is crazy. But we went down there, and she is a former chef, private chef, and she is I guess she's an operations manager of a restaurant group in Seattle now. So we went down there. She did all the culinary things. She booked all of them. That was her job. My job was the wine stuff. And so we went to you guys in June, and we bought like 6 bottles or something. I think this is like kind of like the last of that. But and we went to Kinglet.
Ooh.
And Kinglet was fucking amazing, and I'm so sad. R.I.P. Kinglet. It was a great restaurant. I'm so sad it's closed down now because I really want to go back.
So sad. We're in the same boat. It was an amazing restaurant. That's the hardest thing about Walla Walla, and I feel like Kinglet was amazing. It's hard to be too fancy in Walla Walla, and that's the only thing that's difficult here. Is because like, when it really comes down to it, we have a tourist season, and then we also have a local season, and the locals are blue collar, cut of the earth farmers. You know what I mean? And like, you got to have just like a normal burger, honestly. Like, you got to have that like steak frites or, whatever it is that keeps them going. But man, Kinglet was awesome. We'll miss them. I'm excited that, they get a focus on what they're doing in Seattle. But it's kind of a bummer, and we're really hoping, for the best for those guys. So
absolutely. Befriended my friend Chauncey. He was a sommelier down there.
He moved to New York City.
He moved to New York?
Yeah, I'm not sure where he's working over there, but like, I definitely saw that he's in New York City now. So that's pretty cool for him. It's probably a pretty big leap, but it's like, man, if you as a sommelier, like that's the place. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, he's got the skills. He has the knowledge. He has got the experience. I was hoping he'd wind up somewhere in the PNW so I can go see him again.
Exactly.
But maybe that's another podcast for another time.
You know what? That's the thing about the Pacific Northwest is everyone that leaves always wants to come back. I mean, you leave for so long, and then you're like, oh man, like, there's something Washington and Oregon, like there's just something really nice about Washington and Oregon that I think it's like the outdoors and like the wine and the food and the people. And it's just like, there's so much here that like just keeps you wanting to live here. You know what I mean? I just like, I don't know. I could see myself living somewhere else someday, but at the same time, like, I think I would always come back to somewhere in the Pacific Northwest because it just has a vibe to it,
Absolutely. I mean, I lived in Santa Barbara for 11 years, and it has an amazing wine scene. The people there are awesome in the wine community, like awesome culinary scene. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just so fucking expensive to live there. And I missed Washington State. And so I was like, I need to move back. So
California, man, it's a great state. There's a lot of great things in California. I especially love the Paso Robles area. We love going down there. We actually have Hospice de Rhone happening this week. First time ever. So we're super excited about that. But we always used to go down for Hospice de Rhone down in Paso. And so I really love that area. California is great, but like, yeah, you're right. Living down there is a hard life, man. I mean, you're working to live, you know what I mean? And I'd rather be in the Northwest where we're just living and our jobs are what we have to do. But at the same time, it's not every single thing in your life,
Yeah, I'm a full Washington girl. Go Cougs,
Go Cougs, baby.
Years, we're friends forever now,
Yeah.
So, we're bonded forever.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the homecoming game this past year in Pullman. That was my first game ever. I never went to Wazoo. I mean, I did online for like viticulture and whatnot, but I grew up in Seattle, and I've always been more of a Coug than a Husky. So it was kind of nice going there for viticulture. And my girlfriend, she's thoroughbred. She's legacy Coug all the way. So I went with her, got to see her old sorority house, see how the
Cougs really party.
Yeah, it was pretty nuts.
I heard you fell asleep.
I did.
can't keep up with the Cougs, but what month was the game? Was it November?
It was October.
Gosh, those Coug games, like I swear I've been to like 4 Beavers Cougars games, and those are the coldest games I've ever been to in my entire life. I've never been colder ever in my life than at a Cougars game. Like the Palouse is just frigid. That like air and like, all you want to do is just leave and go drink more. So now I get it. I get why the Cougars, it's you
I think my go-to drink was Angry Orchard with a shot of Fireball in it. And oh my God, before games, just shoot that down.
I cannot. What the fuck is wrong with you?
a while until the sugar rush kicks in, and then,
Yeah. I mean, at the time I went to the game, I had a bit of a cold, so my sinuses were just like blocked.
That's it.
And I knew if I was on Coors Lights, the sinus stuff would
Flush
bug
out.
shit out of me.
Oh.
No, it would get worse. And so I was on. What I decided to do, I was like, I'm just gonna do whiskey gingers the whole time I'm there. Bad choice, very bad choice, because after you're used to drinking Coors Lights like that, going and whiskey gingers go down really easy, and I was drinking them like Coors Lights, and it was not a bad. It wasn't
a Coors Light.
It was not a good scene to see.
Yeah, I actually got kicked out of the Coug over there in
the Coug.
I showed up and the Beavers had just won, and I still had on like, I think I had a Beavers beanie on, and I walked in and everyone just stopped everything they were doing. I know. What I was like, oh, should I go back to the hotel and like change into like new? Like, oh no, like they'll be cool. Like we'll just go get some food. It'll be fine. It was like as soon as we walked in, it was record scratch. Everyone stopped their conversation. I think there's better places for you, sir.
I can picture it now.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't super confrontational. We found another cool bar, like some book bar. I don't remember what it was called, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. Fun.
Yeah, it's a interesting place for sure. Still need to bring my boyfriend there and see what he thinks.
Oh, he has never been there?
No.
Oh my God. We
Yeah.
gotta go together at some point. That's crazy.
Yeah.
The farther your gap gets from like the college age, it gets more different and different. So you gotta attack it sooner than later, because like when you start to get old, then you're like, what are these kids doing? Whereas like 10 years before, you're like, oh, these kids are awesome. Like, let's hang out,
Yeah, and we're getting real close to that 10-year mark.
Well, I'm past it, so
I mean, the last time I was there, I was in this place called Valhalla. Cougs know what that place is, but it's a cool bar. Has really good wings, amazing wings.
It's like a country bar.
Yeah, it's a cool spot. They have like a basement area that has another bar. Location there, which is dope. But a bunch of college kids were sitting next to us, and I was with a bunch of alumni. And one of them accidentally bumped into me, and he was like, "I'm sorry, bro." And I was like, "Oh, you're fine. No worries." And then he was like, "Hey, what year are you?" I'm like, "Yo, I didn't tell him how old I was. I was like, guess
freshman."
And he was like, "Are you like a junior?" Or I'm like, "Nah, I'm way past that."
But thank you.
I was like, "Thanks, man." Yeah. So it was fun. I told him, like, yeah, I'm 33. And he was like, "Oh, what the fuck? That's crazy old, man."
Like, you're not even gray yet. Like, what the
I'm getting some grays in the beard, though. It's happening. It's happening. Can't stay young forever. All right, Brandon. That's it for our time today. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We really appreciate it. Loved hearing about you. Loved hearing about the wine. Real quick, anything you want to plug for the winery?
I mean, come visit us in Walla Walla. We have an awesome tasting room. It's a speakeasy style tasting room, so you wouldn't even know it if it's here. We don't have a sign. You have to kind of like find us. So it's kind of this cool vibe. It feels like your living room. It's a really fun place. If you're in Walla Walla this next week, honestly, Hospice to Rhone is happening here. It's going to be a new thing in Walla Walla. If you want to go to like one of the coolest events that's going to be in the Pacific Northwest, this is something that has only been in Paso Robles. It's coming to Walla Walla for the first time. I don't think it's the last time it's coming to Walla Walla, so it's a super exciting event. Like, we love for you to be at that. I mean, honestly, just come here, because honestly, everyone that just comes here, they end up coming here every year from now on. I mean, that's just the way it goes. Walla Walla once, and then next thing you know, you're already making plans on your next trip here. So come visit us. Our wines are awesome. We'll give you an awesome experience at the winery. We'll set you up with other cool places in the valley, and you know, it's just, you'll have a great time. So come on over.
Absolutely. Sorry, we need to do our goodbye cheers.
Yeah,
and I totally forgot that she's empty.
That's good.
And I'll do a little bit more here. Okay. Here we are. Thank you so much, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All the links are in the show notes. Go there. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, you, now that I have your attention and you've listened to this wonderful podcast that we had to offer, we'd like you to scroll down. And what are they going to do when they scroll down, Ian?
Scroll down and give us some feedback. Rate us on your podcast platform, ideally 5 stars. And if you would give us some critical feedback, you can DM us on Instagram at officialbungpod.
Let's hear it.
Let's go. It is only 2 of us writing the show, 2 of us producing the show. It's me, Ian King, Jasmine Shattuck, and
The lovely Becca Hines.
as our producers. And our writers are me, Ian King, and
Jasmine Shattuck.
let's go.
Let's go.